Welcome food fans, picky eaters, the flavor curious, and everyone in between. Nothing makes good food better than good conversation, and your table is ready. Welcome back to another episode of the Food for Thoughtcast with your hosts, Melissa Reagan and Steven Gonzalez, but you can call them Chef. All right, let's get this episode started.
Melissa, Steven, how are you both?
Hi.
Hey, how's it going?
Hello.
Good. Hey, so who's where?
Go ahead, Steve.
I am in Midland, Texas, all the way in the west, oil country.
Oil country. What's near Midland, Texas?
Well, there's really nothing near Midland, Texas. They call it Midland because it's in the middle of everything. So it's 5 hours away from El Paso, 5 hours away from San Antonio, 5 hours away from Dallas, 5 hours away from... Yeah, we're in the middle of nowhere.
I remember a story about the NBC desk in Los Angeles calling the Houston Bureau to get them to cover something going on in West Texas. And they pointed out to LA, you're about 4 hours closer to it than we are. So it's a big state. Melissa, where are you?
I am in the bustling metropolis of Wake Forest, North Carolina, a small suburb of Raleigh.
That's lovely.
Yeah.
And you can't tell me where you're working, can you?
I cannot. They prefer none of us be like the spokesperson in a situation like this, but
okay, but tell me what we'll play the guess.
It's a guessing game now.
Are you chefing for someone? Are you consulting for someone?
I am the executive chef of the 20th location of a restaurant chain that is attached to a luxury lifestyle retailer. Put it like that.
Oh, I got you. Okay, we'll all be looking for this later. And Steven, you're working. You're attached to what? 7-Eleven? What? She's upscale.
I work. Well, yeah. There's a beauty, there's a beast, you know. I actually work for the number one grocery retailer in the country, otherwise known as HEB.
Woohoo!
Yeah. Shameless plug. Total shameless plug. Yeah.
Well, listen, we don't have it back east, so what can I tell you? Are they wholly owned? Are they part of are they a subsidiary of somebody? Or?
It's a private company. We're still private. We're only based out of Texas and parts of Mexico.
Parts of Mexico? That's where I saw one down. Are you guys in Puerto Vallarta?
I don't think we're that far south.
You know what?
Monterey, things like that.
When I was in Puerto Vallarta, it occurs to me, I got my fresh tortillas at Walmart, which in that town is a relatively upscale grocer.
Yeah.
And the tortillas weren't bad. I mean, interestingly enough, they were flour. So I guess... And the locals were buying them. So I guess the missionaries got as far south as Puerto Vallarta to force
locals buy locals, yeah.
Well, yeah, that's what happened. I mean, they brought wheat to, I thought, just the north, but they brought wheat to much of Mexico. So how did you guys stumble into each other? What I mean, you have the Food for Thought podcast, which has been on for what, 30, 40 years now?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah. We're deep into episode 78.
Not bad.
Are we already that far, man?
Well, that means that we've outperformed 80% of podcasts.
Hey, I'm new to the market, so don't be dismissive of us young kids.
No, absolutely not. Just stick with it. I was just going to tell you that HEB is the equivalent of a Publix for you, David.
No, Publix is in Florida. It's for my 106-year-old mother-in-law.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, no, I'm up here with, get this. This is such...
Wegmans.
There are some Wegmans around, but it's a big deal when one opens.
You got Aldi's and things like that, right?
We got Aldi's, but the big one here is and I say this as a former New York and still Jew, ShopRite, which is has always been in the Northeast, a very Jewish kind of chain in that uh, they had all the Passover stuff. No, not the ones down here on the Jersey Shore, because 11 of us are Jewish, but they still have some matzah. So
we met in culinary school, David.
Back in what, 2004? Yeah, 20 years ago now.
Yeah, we met in culinary school 20 years ago.
Where?
Out in Austin, Texas. Yeah. At Le Cordon Bleu, which is now
now defunct, I think, but Texas Culinary Academy, formerly, and offering the Le Cordon Bleu program.
Well, hold on. Austin is, I think, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, but I think it's a good food town, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah, most definitely.
I mean, did you guys both cook there?
Oh, yeah. Well, Steve did.
I didn't. So. Yeah, I was kind of spoiled where I just went to culinary school and just kind of like had the opportunity to go explore Austin and eat and things like that, And once I finished culinary school, that's when I actually got a job and spent some time in the industry having fun, and learning hands-on.
Well, what fascinates me is everybody who goes to culinary school and says the experience was wonderful and they learned a ton, then tells me, or almost everybody then tells me, but I really learned how to cook on the job. So,
of course, yes. The way it is they teach you all the basics. Yeah, they teach you all the basics, mother sauces, how to, just all the simple things, or that we think is simple now.
It's like all the foundational stuff.
Yeah.
But that piece of paper will get you in the door to further your career. And some people need it and some people don't. Steve and I think, came into the program that we attended with a modicum of cooking experience. There were a lot of people who were like, I quit law school to come in here and didn't know how to boil a hot dog. Hey, God love them. Like, now they're chefs too, hopefully. Well, you know what I mean?
I want to get back to both of your backgrounds in a second, but this takes us into a tangent that I'm fascinated by. Used to be that if you wanted to be a chef, it's because you had a deep-seated need to cook. And perhaps even more important, a deep-seated need to please people. Now I get the sense an awful lot of people are going into this very, very difficult way of life to be famous. Do you see that? Does it trouble you? I mean, whoops, Stephen is waving his hand.
That was me.
Tell me about it.
Well, when I was a senior in high school, I really had no idea of what I was going to do with my life. And a friend of mine said, well, why don't you go to culinary school? And I said, well, I like food and people want to eat food and they'll pay money for food. So why not? And
that's a deeply impassioned defense of your
I'm really not going to lie. I mean, I went into it blindly and I'm glad I did because, if I knew then what I knew now, I probably would have done something different. But my options were pretty much, it was culinary school, go to 4-year university and not know what I was going to do, or the oil field, because I grew up in an oil field family. And looking back on it, I'm really glad that I didn't end up in the oil field because, it's a much harder way of life. And not only that, but there's no guarantee that you have a job going from one day to the next. I speak to so many people out here and they'll tell me, yeah, I got laid off and I'm, trying to find another job, and it's just how it is. That's how volatile that industry is.
Well, so you really didn't know what the hell you wanted to do. You figured you'd make a few bucks cooking.
That's exactly it. Yeah, that's exactly what it was.
Well, were you a food forward family? Look at that alliteration.
Growing up, I mean, we would have barbecues. It was always the same thing, but it was always really good. And I
was
that
one
kid
it?
Who would just
burger.
It was always just fajitas, ribs, things like that. We were always grilling and just having like your traditional Tex-Mex food. And for myself, after school,
the last name is Gonzalez, so
yep.
I assume there's some Hispanic background. Is it Mexican?
Yes. Well, I do have a lot of Spaniard, Italian, and Mexican from my ancestors, things like that, and my grandparents, my great-grandparents. But I mean, I just kind of always embraced, you're there I grew up on the border, and tacos were always a thing. And when you have family, friends over, you're just grilling. You're grilling fajitas, you're making rice, beans, pico de gallo, guacamole, all that stuff. And that's just what I grew up with. But, you know, when I was cooking for myself, before like my parents would get home from work, it was like boiled pasta, ravioli, stuff like that, you know, simple stuff. So that really sparked an interest with me. And I didn't really appreciate it until I went to culinary school, you know?
That you grew up with good food.
I did, yes.
Yeah.
We would make so much, or my grandma, my parents, you know, everyone would just make such really good meals, and it was just an overall great experience, you know. And I didn't really, again, I took advantage of it at the time, but looking back on it, like you were saying, you know, like you want to please people, you want to make them happy, and every time I cook, even to this day, you know, is this going to make me happy? Is this going to make someone else happy? And if it puts a smile on my face, I guarantee you're going to like it, you know?
Well, it's funny.
So you're right.
I'm no chef. I'm an amateur home cook with none of the instinctive abilities chefs have. I mean, you can turn around and flip something without looking at it. I can't. You know, if I'm going to have 4 people over for steak, I buy 5 steaks. So I got one, you know, to cut into and see if they're ready. And then tomorrow I'll make steak salad out of that.
That's a solid strategy.
Yeah, well, it's, you know, or like, but the people pleasing is like, I'll make dinner. I'll ask my wife, is it good? She'll say it's great. And then, you know, a minute later, I'll say, really, is it good? You know, because, but I have that instinct. I'm cooking for other people much more than I'm cooking for myself.
I think instinctively, like if people who create, and chefs included, or whatever it is, right? If you're an artist, writer, a chef, and singer, when you're watching somebody enjoy that finished product, I think that's the most gratifying part.
Yeah.
You know,
big time.
Yeah, but if you fail, it'll kill you. I made something the other day that
everything's your baby.
I made something that didn't work, and I had made it previously, and it had worked, and I felt terrible. Melissa, what's your cooking history? Where did you grow up?
So I grew up in Dallas, Texas, actually in Garland, a small suburb of Dallas. I always just say Dallas because it's one of those things like nobody ever's heard of Garland.
I thought you guys all said the Dallas-Fort Lurch Metroplex.
No, we don't like to include Fort Worth. We have beef with them. It's a separate story.
Sorry.
No, it's fine. I have the feelings
people there, right? What is that? The cattlemen's or something? The stock?
I mean,
yeah. Okay.
So they say. Stockyards, they have the stockyards and all that stuff. So when you say like, why do you want to do this? It was always to take care of people, and quite the opposite of being famous. I wanted to be behind the scenes, making sure that people were being taken care of, because I will watch my grandmother feed people and just, you know, feeding us and seeing the love and care she put into it. And I was like, I want to make other people feel the way that she made me feel.
Well,
and
was there an
I don't want to be in front of people at all, you know?
Was there an ethnic component to what you ate growing up? Where's your grandmother?
No, I mean, my lineage is kind of like Irish mutt, and a little Native American, as much as anybody could claim, kind of, that's coming through Texas and kind of ancestry up through Oklahoma, maybe a teaspoon, but no, just really good old fashioned Southern.
Which means what? Because there's 800 kinds of stuff.
Right. So in our particular, like, you know, microcosm of that, you've got bacon grease in your vegetables and Jello salads on the table at Thanksgiving, and you know, a lot of roast, a lot of.
Well, you had me at bacon grease. You lost me at ambrosia, but.
So, you know, there's a lot of different kinds. I mean, I don't think they're all created equal, but you know, if it doesn't have marshmallows in it, like, you know, but just the table being a place to gather and not being afraid to try new things, and, you know, always just wanting to make sure everybody's taken care of. And so my approach to being in this business was from a place of service. How can I serve somebody else? I'd much rather be in the back toiling away than in front of anybody. And it's interesting because, you know, you asked that question and I was like, gee, but I thought when kids were going into our class to go to culinary school that they wanted to be the next Food Network person. Now it's all those like reality competition deals. And it's like, well, we have all these TikTok influencers now that it's like everybody can be a home chef, which I don't have a problem with that, but I think it's changed the game so much. It's like, you don't have to have any credentials behind it. it's such a bizarre phenomenon. Like it, you know. So, but no ethnic flavor, just good flavor.
Well,
Yeah.
Just
you guys keep sending me down tangents, so I'll go down that tangent.
please
and we'll
follow
come
them all.
So you look at TikTok or you look at Instagram and you see someone telling you how to cook, and do you throw your shoes at the phone? I mean, what? Is it awful?
There are some things that we've seen or that I've seen that
Yeah.
just really get under my skin, but there are some things that just really make my eyes open up because, you know, you don't have to have a degree to be good in what you do. You don't, you know, but if they're making something that they believe in, that they want other people to make, and they represent it well, I mean, I think that's really a good way to do it.
I mean, I think there are enough lanes for everybody to be in. I think that one of the biggest problems I see with kind of this like quick culinary influencer culture that we have is when you misuse ingredients or equipment or tools in ways that it was never intended just for views. Like that's what really gets under my skin when somebody's like, I saw a video the other night. It was like, let's put A5 with chocolate, like A5 Wagyu and we're going to cook it in chocolate to be like we did. And I was like, well, I have bills to pay. So I'm not messing, like we're not doing, you know, I'm going to treat this ingredient with the respect that it deserves. You know what I mean?
Okay, I've never seen that. That would have been one thing where I would have said, okay, no,
But wait, hold on, time out. Chocolate has long been a savory ingredient
of course.
in Mexican cooking.
And Spanish, right?
Yeah, I remember.
They were probably using milk chocolate, I would imagine. No, what kind were they using?
I don't know that it was Valrhona, but
no.
I remember years ago being assigned before I had a show on my own. I was working for somebody. I got assigned to cover an all chocolate dinner at a high end New York restaurant. There was chocolate and everything. Now, except for dessert, it wasn't sweet because chocolate's long been a savory ingredient. In South and Central America and Mexico.
But that's when you're using it right. You know, like in Mexican cuisine, you have like a mole negro, and you have dark chocolate in there, and it's
well. Hold on, I almost made a mistake in my book. At one point, I described mole as including chocolate, and thank God I caught it at the last minute. Most moles or many moles have chocolate, but not all of them, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That would have been embarrassing.
Well, what kind of chocolate, though? You know, like I said, you have to go in. That's where I get a little bit, you know, OCD on that one because it's like you can't just use any chocolate because if you put that, someone's going to throw like Hershey's in there and they're going to wonder, what is this? You know,
Hershey's is a perfect example. To a chocolate connoisseur, it's crap. But to generations of American kids who grew up eating it, it's irreplaceable. It's like Brits with Cadbury's. The Cadbury's they get are different than the Cadbury's we get. And
I mean, it's beloved for a reason, but it's also made to be eaten alone. You know, like the product's the product.
I thought you meant pathetically in your darkened apartment grieving over a breakup. Yeah, it should be eaten alone.
Who told you that's what I do?
That's why they sell ice cream by the pint, for Christ's sake.
Well, that's
otherwise, we'd all be eating gallons after a bad day.
I mean, the product's the product, right? So you're not putting like a Hershey's cookies and cream you're not going to finish like Spanish estofado with it. Like that's not what that's for. But
Which means caviar is more useful because you can eat it by itself or you can garnish something with it.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I think that speaks to, you know, you're talking about like, you say that you're not a chef, but I think that, you know, there's that old African proverb, right? If you can walk, you can dance. If you can talk, you can sing, and so on and so forth. But I think, you know, if you know how to cook, then you're a cook at least, right?
Oh, I'm a cook. I think as home cooks go, I think I'm pretty damn good. But over the past decades, I have seen so many chefs at work. And by the way, that doesn't mean a white tablecloth restaurant. My perfect example of this is you Texans. We were shooting at Louis Miller Barbecue in Taylor, Texas, which has been there for 80 years now. Most of it in the same former girls' basketball gym. And Guy was interviewing Bobby Miller, Louis' son. Louis had passed. Bobby owned the restaurant at that point. And in the middle of the interview, he reached behind him to the smoker and started moving briskets around. And Guy, or maybe I, said, "Why'd you do that?" And he said, "Well, they needed it." I mean, after decades, well, as a chef, he knew that smoker and he knew the meat, and he just instinctively knew that this had to go there and this had to go there without look. I'm the guy cutting the steak open. So yes, there's a big difference between a chef and a cook. And by the way, I'm all for amateur cooking. I do it. I love it. It's great. But,
and I think people should feel really comfortable. Like, I get asked for recipes a lot. And I just kind of hit this point sometimes where I'm like, oh my God, I'm not Google, right? Because I didn't go to school to follow recipes. There's nothing wrong with recipes. They're good for consistency, and they're good for foundation and ratios and things like that. It's a guideline. Mm-hmm. But to have the instinct, like I could make you a very, very amazing kind of a savory caramel to go with that A5 with some chili threads in it. That would be like a really good use of a dessert.
Yes, element, I'll be right there.
Right. Right. But it has to be appropriate. One of my favorite desserts I ever made of all time was I did an entire savory tasting for a whiskey dinner. And it was 7 courses, but the very last course was heirloom tomato cobbler with blue cheese and blue cheese ice cream. It was Maytag blue cheese ice cream in a shot glass of Not Your Father's root beer. All savories played off one another. It takes instinct to do that. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Like, well, that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, exactly. But that's exactly what we mean. Like it. Ugh. But I think influencers will just be like, I cooked this and this for fun, and it makes no sense. But yet they persist, and they keep getting famous.
So okay, you're a home chef. No, you're a home cook. Hell, you're an influencer, whatever.
Sure.
What do I need to do to become a great home cook? Stumped you.
I would say, just keep exploring what you like, keep playing with different ideas that you might have, things like that. It's always good to put your twist on everything. In my opinion, for example, one of my favorite things to make is as simple as it is. And I think we discussed it when you came onto our podcast was Caesar salad, Caesar dressing. That's the one thing that I feel like I make better than anyone else. And I would put it up against just about anyone, and it took a lot of time. It took a lot of tries to get it just perfect, in my opinion, and
what made it perfect? What cracked the code?
For me, it was just getting that right amount of like sherry vinegar, because that's what I like to use. It was getting that right amount of garlic, because I love garlic. I make mine real thick, like a mayo base, and adding just a little bit of water to like thin it out to where you can spread it, things like that, and just finding all the flavors that I like put together and balancing all that. And so for someone who's calls themselves a home cook or whatever you want to call yourself, I think once you find that balance that you like, again, it'll definitely take your cooking game to a whole nother level, because then you start, really dissecting everything that you're making. So even if it's something as simple as a steak, you're experimenting with different flavors. You're experimenting with different temperatures to cook your steak. You're experimenting with different times, like when to flip it and turn it and things like that. You're experimenting with, do I want to put like a salted butter? Do I want to put like a compound butter? Like,
okay, but wait, I'm cooking at home, and for years I have been reading, don't play with your meat. Put it in the pan. And let the Maillard reaction. You're laughing, Mo. Let the Maillard reaction happen, and flip it only once. In the last couple years, all the advice has been flip it constantly
and baste it in butter.
That's been a huge trend.
Well, so back to your original question, and then I'm going to follow up on the steak question specifically. If you're cooking at home and you want to be really good, master some classics. Have a great omelet under your belt.
Learn how to make the hardest thing for a home cook to learn.
But it's like, don't be afraid to try, right?
But
don't
be afraid with scrambled eggs.
Don't be afraid to season. Okay, right? And I couldn't make a perfect omelet when I got to culinary school either. I made a bunch of magically micro scrambled eggs, right? Very creamy. Like just look at these incredible scrambled eggs. Hey, that wasn't the assignment. B minus, right? But don't
Wait
be
a second. You could get a B minus for not doing the assignment?
well,
They
I
talk
mean,
about
like
grade inflation at Harvard.
like I think it's on a curve. I don't know.
Apparently.
So, but I think, concerning steak, right? The myth that you can't seal the juices in a steak. You've heard this?
Well, I thought it was true.
It's not true. It's a huge myth. The fibers in a piece of meat run so that they're a network and run all sort of different directions, regardless of the grain. And there's nothing in that fiber network that actually has the ability to hold in liquid. It's a huge myth. So whether you sear it or not, so that kind of goes to like a crock pot, right? You sear the roast, you don't, you're going to get the caramelization flavor, but it's not going to make it more moist one way or the other. With a steak, it's interesting because once you seal the outside, there's really no way for all that butter based to make a huge difference, except that the flavor that you're getting is from the constant browning of the butter, the milk solids browning. You're deepening and developing the flavor and making it more complex, but that butter is not getting into the meat. You know what I'm saying? If you brown it on one side or the other, it just depends on how long you want to spend cooking your steak.
Well,
Yeah.
My suggestion is get the flavor on the front end by marinating it or rubbing it, or even just pat it dry, leave it in the fridge seasoned for a couple of days. That way you get a little bit of a wet age. You know what I mean? At home, right?
Yeah.
That's going to develop that depth of flavor. But as far as the cooking process is concerned, if you want it rare, give it a minute on each side and let it rest. I mean, the most important thing is like sear it well, make sure it's seasoned, and rest it properly.
Okay, now you're
You know what I
completely
mean?
screwing me up because of late, based on consumer information, I've adopted the reverse sear.
You
where-
can reverse sear.
That's fine too.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But don't I
absolutely.
lose moisture? Well, I mean, I picked a number. I reverse sear at 270. Is that too high? Is it too low in the oven?
That's
A
in
little high?
range.
That's
Yeah.
all right. And then
I
you
mean,
take
I
it
think
out
you
and
can,
sear it quickly.
I like to get mine hotter, but
Yeah, I mean, I think you can do like 300, 325 if you want, just depending on
Yeah.
the size of the steak. There's nothing wrong with the reverse sear. I just don't like extra steps. Like I'm like, well, this I don't know. Sometimes I want an A to B solution, and then especially when I lived in Texas, I'm like, I'm not turning the oven on for one thing. You know what I mean? So mine's like practicality based, really.
I'm not turning the damn oven on.
I am not turning the damn oven on. Exactly.
How about the air fryer? You like the air fryer?
I do. I love air fryers. It's funny that you bring that up because yesterday I picked up some chuck eye steaks and
Some what?
some chuck eye steaks.
Chuck eye.
I have chuck. Isn't that
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
a cheap
Exactly what it
cut.
is.
Why would you?
It's an inexpensive cut that is, to me, almost as good as like a ribeye. Like it's tender. It's delicious. It's amazing. And my at work is I'm learning all these different cuts. Granted, I know about a lot of this stuff, but like butchering is not my forte. So I have my meat cutters saying you got to try this steak, you got to try this, you got to try this, and they're turning me on to all these things that I didn't even know about. So going back to the air fryer,
like what? Come on.
So one of the things that HEB is known for is like a pork ribeye. Like I never really thought of stuff like that. During culinary school.
You're talking about like a blade steak, like from the shoulder, the pork shoulder.
Yeah, so it's part of the loin, but like the way that they cut it, it still has that lip on it to where it looks just like a ribeye, and it's a lot more tender than like just pork loin. Again, I'd never heard of it up until I started working at HEB, and when they told me that the very first time, I thought, what? No way. And once I cut into it and tried it, I thought, okay, I could eat a lot more pork like this, But going back to the air fryer. I will be, seasoning and cooking some chuck eye steaks in my air fryer because I've done it, but it's been so long that I wouldn't mind not perfecting it, but showing people out there like, hey, it can be done, because right now I'm without gas at my house. So I could turn the oven on and heat up my entire oven where it's about 100 degrees today, or I could just do the air fryer and, do it a lot quicker, you know?
So just to give a little bit color to this, David. So Steve told me earlier that he was going to do this, and I was thinking about like the science. I'm a convert to the air fryer. I thought it was black magic voodoo at first, and I didn't trust it. So I was like, this is weird. All it is a tiny convection oven. Well, be that as it may, it's super fast and it does a lot of it does a lot of really neat things because of the way that it circulates the hot air. It's different from a microwave where the microwave bounces the water molecules and will like cook all the liquid out of something. So I'm like, I'm really interested to see how this chuck eye steak comes out of this air fryer and like what the verdict is, because
you can do almost anything with an air fryer. They slice, they dice, they almost they don't really do all that, but I mean it saves you a lot of time. It's something different where a lot of people like, I love fried foods, but I don't want to have that grease smell in my house. So the air fryers, I tried it out and I thought this is actually pretty great. And I had a small one to begin with. Now I have like about an 8-quart air fryer, and I think they're really good. Yeah,
and soon you'll replace your garage with a massive air fryer.
That like if I could do that, one? I would.
Okay. Okay, you thought it was a gimmick. It's not.
Yeah. I mean, much. At least to me, I know like Alton Brown rails against it. He goes like, there's no such thing as air frying. It's not frying. I'm like, I understand, but you can make something crispy with a tiny countertop appliance. And like, I'm a fan. And it does a little bit more than a toaster oven, in my opinion. So
people, one of the arguments for air fryers is health.
Sure.
In that typically American way where moderation doesn't enough.
Exist.
Yeah. Healthy olive oil, nah, I can't have any oil. Do we just jump on trends that sound good but don't really make culinary sense?
Oh yeah, I think so. I mean,
I would say it depends for me.
Tons of times. But I think in this case, like, they can take my money if I can buy, chicken nuggets and get them to taste like they came out of grease and it's not,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm like, I don't even care. Take my money, like if I can David, I can freeze a block of tofu, thaw it out, wring the water out of it, chunk it up, toss it in cornstarch, and not dirty a pan or use oil on the stove and get the consistency that I want. Like, that's a win. I don't know.
Oh yeah, nothing upsets me more than inconsistent tofu, because I'm just down in that all the time. Yeah.
Well, I'm just saying it's one of the messier things you can do on the stovetop, and often with varied results. But I can get super consistent results.
Yeah. Okay.
So
if it makes my life a little easier, then I'm all for it. And anytime, like with the air fryer, I went into it with a lot of skepticism, but I eventually came around to it, and now it's trying to just find all the different things I can make with it.
Well, this is one of those things where I'm like, this is a tiny convection oven. I am in a rental home. I don't have a convection oven full size. So this is giving me that, that perk where I didn't have it before. I view this the same as I do a cake mix. I'm not going to demonize a cake mix because at the end of the day, even though it has some shelf stabilizer in it, it's pre-measured dry ingredients. And if it gets me from A to B, it saves me a couple steps. I'm like, I'm really not mad at it.
Okay, so let's discuss pre-measured ingredients. To me, there is nothing dumber than a meal preparation kit. The amount of time you have to take to open the cellophane pack full of pepper when you could have poured some pepper in, or to deal with their pre-portioned piece of protein when you could have taken a chicken, put it in the oven, waited a while, and taken it out. It's almost making cooking harder than it needs to be.
I think. Sorry, Steve. Go ahead.
Oh no, go ahead. I was trying to think of something.
I think that the demographic that it's marketed for is underutilizing it. I think it has a great place in the accessibility space for people that
I'm sorry. What do you mean by that?
I think that it really is marketed for people who need more accessible options. So I'll give you an example. Like maybe somebody is neurodivergent and they have real challenges like pre-planning and being consistent.
Yes, but come on, that's
right. But I also think like if you need something that's pre-portioned, right? But I think that people will seek out meal plans because they think that they're easier, right? Which is like that's the big misconception.
which brand's cooking a chore?
Well, yeah, I tried one for a little while and I was like, oh, this will be cool. Every single entree came with potatoes, and I was like, I love potatoes as much as the next guy, but this is not for me. And then the other thing is, I was really pissed that I had to cut up everything. Still, I was like, wait.
I didn't. Okay, you still had to cut up the stuff.
Yeah.
Like somebody said, here's some vegetables. Now you cut them up like you could have brought them home from the supermarket.
Exactly.
I assume HEB carries vegetables. Okay.
Yeah. We did that too.
It's the in between. It takes some of the mental load off, and it's the pre-management of like the figuring out your not getting decision fatigue and kind of having it set up for you. But I think there's some missing components to it. Make it worth it.
Well, do you think as a country we're eating better? I mean, I don't see McDonald's going away. And by the way, I'm not saying McDonald's is the devil. There are times when there is not, well, to hell with McDonald's. There's time that nothing is good as a bag full of White Castle sliders, but, and they're not going out of business. But are we eating better in any way, either health or taste or expanding our boundaries?
I definitely think we're expanding our boundaries, because if you look at a lot of the food chains, fast food chains, things like that, they're trying to come up with all these new things. They're trying to reinvent the wheel.
In what way?
Like that. So, like, for example, with Taco Bell, I don't eat Taco Bell.
Cantina menu.
Yeah. See, and so like they're, for example, in my opinion, they're taking chalupas, meats, quesadillas, things like that, and they've been doing that for years, So they're always trying to like reinvent or one up themselves, because I mean, when you think of like fast food Mexican, you think Taco Bell.
They brought Mexican in some form to the entire country.
Yeah. Sure. And so again, they're always trying to reinvent them. Well, maybe not reinvent themselves. I keep saying that, but they keep trying to one up themselves. Where they're trying to push the envelope on something new. Burger places are starting to come up with, for example, down here in Texas, like with Whataburger, that's the big one that we love. They're starting to incorporate like green chilies, things like that. And being out here in West Texas, so close to New Mexico, you get a lot of debates from people who are from New Mexico who are eating them, saying, this is all right. Then you have people who are from Texas saying this is the greatest thing ever. And so
kind of like reaction outside New England to the McDonald's lobster roll. It didn't go over.
But I mean, yeah, people are always just trying to like come up with new ideas, things like that. I wouldn't say that we're eating better per se, but we're definitely, the people are just adventurous.
Yeah, I think there's a lot more mindfulness, but there is still a lot of like very toxic diet culture that you have to wade through. There's all the camps that are like, only eat butter, only eat meat, cut out all grains. Keto is the only diet. You have to figure out what works best for you. And then you kind of have to, there was a slow food movement for a while, but I mean, a place like McDonald's, they're not trying. They know that's not their niche. Like they are what they are. And people are going to seek it out when they want something convenient. Sometimes it's tasty. I don't go out of my way to eat it, but sometimes like maybe it's the only option. But I think we're trying to be more mindful about what we eat, but there's so many voices in that space as a nation that you really have to weed through a lot of it.
Well, you're kind of made to feel guilty if you're not eating local, sustainable, organic. What am I missing?
Oh my gosh. I used to work at this place that would use local products, but they just meant from the state of Texas. You realize it takes 10 hours to drive. Like, what does local mean? Well, and there's a huge foraging movement too,
Excuse me?
Like
people
foraging.
Are out by the side of the road picking up
1,000%. Yeah, there are whole
I
restaurants.
wouldn't trust those mushrooms. I'm sorry.
There are entire restaurant menus and tasting menus based on like get these dandelion greens from out in the median. I kid you not. Like
Yeah,
there's a lot of
I remember that farm
but
to
yeah.
table, all
Okay,
that
so
stuff.
how
Yeah,
important is it? I mean, look, I interviewed Dan Barber not that long ago, and
Mhm.
Dan Barber is completely convinced that things taste better when they're grown where they ought to be grown, and that tomatoes from a backyard are going to be better than tomatoes shipped across the country.
What do you mean by grown where they should be grown?
The products that are endemic or intrinsic to an area are the products he thinks
Okay.
we should eat in that area.
Things that are like made for that climate, in other
Yeah,
words, or
even if you
vice
can
versa.
grow them elsewhere, he makes what to me is a compelling argument that they're going to taste better where the conditions are best for them, and that's in your
Well, yeah,
backyard.
anything's going to taste better when it hasn't sat on a truck coming across the
Is
country.
there scientific
Right,
reasoning
like
behind that? I mean,
I don't think there's scientific. I think it's a great story to tell. Like, hey, with the whole farm to table movement, what was it, like 10, 15 years ago? It's a great story to tell where, hey, this pig came from Farmer Stevens' L7 Ranch out of so and so,
and we
and
still
these
killed it.
pigs. Yeah, we killed them. We fed
Well-
them, local acorns. We gave them beer for the flavor of the meat, things like that. It's a great story to tell. That's just my opinion. So
Well, there is science out there. I'm not a scientist by any means, but I know that there have been studies about eating the things that come from kind of the same biome where you live, right? Like maybe you have less histamine response, maybe
yeah,
like maybe the nutrients are more bioavailable because it's in the same soil, that blah 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 blah. Like I'm not smart enough to speak to that. I know those studies have been done. I think, but like good on Dan Barber because I think there's a lot of truth to, if I went and bought a tomato at the farmer's market, even if it was 7 counties over, it's going to taste better than something that came from
Oh, yeah.
California on a truck.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? Like
And
Yeah,
that
he's
he's
not
trying
wrong
to
at
be
all.
round to fit in the packaging.
Yeah, like they probably gassed it to make it ripen faster, and
Yeah.
it's not going to have the sweetness. And I mean, I think there is some truth to that. But I think more, it's probably the feeling you get when you're supporting your neighbors.
Mhm.
You know what
Plus,
I mean?
I'm sure I'm sure Dan Barber knows exactly what he's talking about, and he can make anything taste really, really good. Because he's got the experience, and he's got
And a hell of a farm.
I was gonna say he's a total badass too.
Yeah,
He
absolutely.
is. Dan, you're a total badass. I'm
Yeah.
gonna send him this clip.
No pressure. He's gonna be like, "Who's this guy? What the
He
heck?
is.
What in the world?" Yeah. So
Um,
yeah, but what he's saying, it's not wrong. I don't really get into the whole scientific part of it, but I love that storytelling. I love that people really like when you really build all those details, people get more into it. And not only that, but they're more invested like in your dish because they know where it came from. It's a great experience.
what do you do at HEB? Are you do you cook for them?
So I started off cooking for them where I did their cooking connection, which is kind of like one of those little cooking kiosks. I would sell sauces, products, things like that, kind of like to make a quick dinner at home.
Mm-hmm.
And I came from hotel restaurants, and it was one of those things where I would just try to really oversimplify, like, hey, the majority of the work's done for you. Now I've moved up into store leadership where I kind of look at like facility, budgets, audits, things like that. And so I don't, as much as I don't cook for them anymore, I love seeing new products and thinking like, how can we use these products, things like that,
Okay, let me kind of sum that up. So you oversee how cooking is done at various HEB markets, correct?
Not necessarily. I'm at one specific store, and I just make sure that facility is up and running at all times.
Okay.
I want to do that. Don't get me wrong. That would be fun.
I'll tell your bosses. So
Yeah.
you oversee at HEB. At your store. You oversee something that didn't exist. I don't know, 10 years ago, 15 years ago. Food preparation.
The role
maybe
that I'm
it
currently in,
existed
I mean,
to
it's
some
been
extent,
going on for a while.
but
It's had different names. Go ahead.
Yeah, but now supermarkets, according to an industry analyst I speak to, supermarkets are challenging quick service restaurants as suppliers of a pre-made meal you can take
Hmm.
for dinner, or in some cases eat in the supermarket. And
Yeah,
they're being
exactly.
called grocerants. Is
So
Like it.
uh,
I was going to say, I mean, they're expanding into the restaurant. Well, more like a barbecue game, if you will. You know, they had a couple of restaurants and they wanted to try that market out, and it worked. But you know, in my opinion, they just had such a huge menu, and even though they brought in, you know, professional chefs, things like that, I just feel like it was just too much for what it was. So they literally hit the ground, not running. I mean, they were just speeding, you know. And now they've mastered the art of like the barbecue, things like that. So the grocerant, yeah, that they're really working hard to do that. And I can remember when they started doing like the home meals, like where it's the meal in a kit, and they call it Meal Simple. And I remember when, for example, let's just say Texas style chili, you know, it would come with like a pound of ground beef and our Fritos, and it would have all the spices, everything in the steps, you know.
hold on,
Yeah.
Stephen. You are selling ground beef as
So
Texas chili as opposed to cubed beef?
so
You're
yes,
probably putting
they,
bam beans in there too, aren't you?
you know, I'm not gonna lie, they
Oh,
did put
jeez, come on.
they they were marketing towards the customer, towards the consumer, to make it like a 15-20 minute meal.
You
And
I
have
mean,
you know,
read
there's
A
plenty.
it's
Loaf
a
of Bread
great
by Frank
concept.
X. Tolbert, haven't you?
There are plenty of folks in Texas that
It's
don't know any better that still put beans in their chili. Unfortunately, there's
Jesus.
not
and
many purists
but
in the
but if
state,
you think
Then
about
you'll
it,
be putting it on spaghetti with nutmeg. Take that.
or a cinnamon roll.
wait a minute, that sounds, Melissa, haven't you been doing that lately? No, I'm kidding. No, but I mean, the at home cook, they don't know that you gotta get your pan scalding hot to season your beef and get a sear on it. Things they don't know all that. So like it's a lot more convenient to just use ground beef and then add the seasonings, things like that. So again, it ties into your 15-20 minute meals to feed a family of like four or two or three or whatever the case is. And so it was just for convenience, and it's evolved into this, you know, and even a lot of other grocery retailers do it today too, where it's like the, for example, I don't know what they call it, but like the at-home meals where you just pop it in an entire pan into the oven, and you got a quick, easy meal for one, you know.
Used to be
And it's
called
just
a hungry man dinner.
true, yeah. But these, I guess, are not frozen. But I mean, just seeing the evolution of all of it, and I remember it from the very beginning. You know, you would throw so much away because it would go out of date because people didn't know anything about it. Now it's, you know, convenience, and I mean, just seeing where it's going has really been interesting. You know.
Well, where do you
I'm,
think?
I'm
Sorry, go ahead, Melissa.
I was just going to say I'm all in favor of something that gets somebody into the kitchen that may not have been in the kitchen before. And I don't think we have to gatekeep it. Like, you know what I mean? It doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be. God bless them, right? Like they're gonna
Mhm.
love it. You know what I mean? Like,
Well, a grease
get it in
fire
there.
will get you into the kitchen too.
Sure.
It would.
What do you think
Indeed.
is coming down the pike for America's dining habits?
I think that, you know, continuing on with these at-home meals, getting just people to, you know, to cook at home more because they got kids, they get home from work, you know, they don't want to think about what they're going to have to make at home for dinner for everyone. I mean, you still have that small population of people who, yeah, when I get home, I'm going to do this. But I think it's just consistent or continuous evolution of just the at-home easy meals. Pop them in the oven, call it a day. You know, and you have something 20 minutes later.
Okay. And if you wanted to encourage people to try actual scratch cooking to make good, simple meals, what would you suggest? We've already done steak.
Go ahead, Melissa, take that one.
And I would start with a burger. Perfect a burger.
How do you
Figure out
how do you perfect a burger?
Well, at home, right? Figure out how you like it. Get some practice using the grill. sear it in a cast iron skillet, get comfortable touching raw meat, get comfortable seasoning raw meat, right?
And then wash your hands.
Yeah, of course, wash your hands, right?
One would hope.
Start with something simple and perfect it, and then you can build on it as a foundation. I mean, that's part of the reason why our podcast exists, right? Like if you'll bear me the shameless plug for like
Please.
1 minute. I started the podcast because I wanted everybody to be welcome at the virtual table. I didn't want people to feel like they were left out of the conversation just because they didn't have the title chef. Mm-hmm. And Steve has existed all along, right? Your main goal was to
get people cooking at home.
Yeah, inspire confidence in the kitchen. So we hope that every week we can entertain, but also educate and give people a place to start if they have nowhere else to start, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Baby steps.
5 things to know and remember if you're going to cook at home.
Season.
Much
color.
More than you're used to. What else?
Much more than color.
Keep it simple.
Okay, we're up to 3. Seasoning, color, keep it simple. I need 2 more.
Flavor, which is different than seasoning. Bitter, salty, acidic, sweet, umami. Learn how those work, how they play off of each other.
So how do I learn how those work?
Experiment. That's number 5. Don't be afraid to get it. Don't be afraid to get it wrong.
No.
Try.
I'm such an idiot. I will actually try something for the first time with guests coming over. So talk about fearless failures.
I applaud that.
I think that's great.
Man,
it's still coming to my house, though. You don't know if I'm going to be, here's the deal. You talked earlier about consistency. I can make the same dish twice and it's completely different. I did everything the same.
It's true.
I think. I spiced it. I seasoned it. I did everything the same and it tastes different. How do I get around that? How do I get the consistency, Gene?
Well, it depends on what it is. Well, first, Steve, go ahead. I feel like I cut you off.
I was just going to say, walk yourself through every single step, because I remember when we were in culinary school, we had a chef instructor who would say, like, I have students come up to me and they say, I followed this recipe exactly and it comes out different. And his first question was, well, what did you do? And they would start walking through it. And, as they're walking through it, they would discover, okay, well, I didn't measure out the seasoning, or I didn't sear this long enough, or I did, you know what I'm saying? And so the more you do that, the more practice you get. If it doesn't come out the same way, walk yourself through as to why it didn't. What exactly did you do? Did you measure exactly 1 teaspoon of salt, or did you cook this pasta for exactly 8 minutes? Did you cook it for 8 minutes and 10 seconds? You know what I'm saying? Like little things like that will help build consistency.
If you're having trouble with consistency from one time to the other, I think it's also good to consider variables that you maybe can and can't control, and then get ahead of those, right? Like if you were making fudge, for example, it's hard to get fudge to work correctly if it's raining outside. There are some variables that you may or may not have control over. If the weather's weird, your bread might not rise correctly. You know what I mean? If it's too hot in your kitchen, the starter might die. If you get that water,
factors, humidity, temperature. Things cook differently in the mountains in Denver.
100%. Yeah. Elevation and things like that. And then the next thing is, as silly as this sounds, either voice record on your phone the steps that you took, or send yourself a text throughout, right, to your own number. So it'll just keep popping up. You'll have a little visual aid, a little reminder there. And then that way you can start framing a recipe, right? You can be like, I used this pan, I used this spoon. Sometimes the variables you can't control are things like, this lemon is juicier than this one. This meat is really fatty. The last time I bought it was lean, right? And that's where you might have to make the adjustments. Hey, last time I had Himalayan salt, it has a completely different flavor than, say, like a coarse kosher. And then if you use, if you're the recipes of old that got passed down from the people before us might have the words pinch or handful. Well, when you were 10, your hands were smaller. You know what I mean? Like, just, when you're talking about consistency, right? Make sure it's something that you can duplicate,
What are your death row meals?
Oh, yeah.
I'll fess up. Mine is either brisket from Louis Miller's or bagel lox and cream cheese from Russ and Daughters on the Lower East Side of Manhattan. Nova lox with an everything bagel, because you can't use belly lox; it's too salty with an everything. Okay, so what are your death row meals?
Go, Steven.
Yikes.
Oh, Steven, she figures you're more likely than her to be convicted of a capital crime. Congratulations.
Probably.
Yeah.
You know.
Mischief.
I would say mine would be a seafood Alfredo with king crab, good garlic bread, and for dessert, I would probably have to say some sort of giant oatmeal cream pie. I don't know.
Okay, the Alfredo, as the Italians make it in Italy, with no cream, or as it's made as part of the Italian American book, you want cream in it. Okay,
I do, because that's it, if that's what I'm going to have one last time, let's do it. Why change it up?
You're not good point. Good point. Clogged arteries are no longer an issue.
Yeah.
Okay,
exactly.
Melissa, what are you having the night before?
So I want the pan-fried shad with green pea foam from Number 9 Park in Boston.
Shad?
That's what I want.
Roe?
Yeah. No. Just,
shad is a kind of fish? What is it? Explain it.
Japanese shad. It's like a perch. It's like a perch. It's like bait sometimes.
There's a lot to be said for bait.
It was the meal that made me want to be a chef professionally.
At this particular restaurant in Boston.
Yes, it was a tasting menu. Number 9 Park.
Is it still
Boston.
open?
Yes,
still open. I'm calling and I'm going to get that chef on.
So Barbara Lynch, get her on. Yeah,
Barbara
she's
Lynch?
amazing. Yeah, I'll give you the details after this is over. She's a powerhouse. Started as a busser. I think didn't graduate high school, but so on and so forth. Like a huge restaurant name in the Boston area. But anyhow, she was the person who I looked at and went like, "Oh my God, women can do this as a job. I want to do this." Like people can make it. So that holds a special place in my heart. Otherwise, it's going to be fried chicken, mashed potatoes, gravy, collard greens, corn, like a whole soul food. That's ham hock. Yeah, that. If I'm gonna do it, I'm gonna do it big.
Where'd you fall in love with that dish?
So, just in Texas, right? Fried chicken, fried anything really, but fried chicken that's done really well. It doesn't have to be triple coated. A lot of times when you do that, it's like the crust falls off, but it's that one where you sink your teeth into a drumstick and everything is well seasoned and it sticks to the meat and you have some in every bite. The grease runs down your hand, right? Like that's giving me warm fuzzies right now, but gravy with plenty of bacon in it, collard greens with ham hocks, yes.
Another unhealthy death row meal.
Well, but if it's your last meal,
that's fine.
Yeah.
Who's counting?
It's fascinating. Exactly. You know the story about the fried chicken ladies in Virginia? That was the first known paying job that former slaves who were female are the business. It's the first known business that was opened by freed female slaves was at a train station in Virginia. They would bring platters of fried chicken and sell them through the windows of the train cars. Wow. They weren't allowed into those coaches because they were segregated. They couldn't go in. They would literally walk onto the tracks when the train stopped at a station and sell their fried chicken through the window. Fascinating story. Anything I haven't asked you guys want to enlighten me on? Because you're great. No? Okay.
Oh, man.
Well, listen, let's plug your podcast again.
All right. So we've got the Food for Thoughtcast.
Anywhere I can get a podcast.
Anywhere finer podcasts are posted. Yes, sir. Drops every Thursday. We have guests. Mr. David himself has been on twice.
Hey, I'm looking for the 5-timers jacket.
Recently, absolutely. it'll be just like SNL. But me and my wonderful co-host Steven, we just love talking to people about food and the food that they love. and inspiring people to take risk and cook. And so that's what we do.
And God knows, sometimes when you come to my house for food, everyone's taking a risk.
But you can find It's the Food for Thoughtcast on Facebook and Instagram. So come be a part of the conversation.
Yeah.
You guys are going to send me your logo after this so I can put it on the screen.
Absolutely. Yep. Absolutely.
Melissa, Stephen, you guys are fantastic. And I love your podcast. And thanks for having me on. And
thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you
for
doing
Thanks for having us.
Anytime.
Absolutely. Yeah, had a blast. Thank you so much.
Excellent. Thanks, guys.
That's a wrap for today. Until the next episode of the Food for Thoughtcast, make good food, eat good food, share it, and be kind to one another.
Thanks so much for listening today. You are part of what makes us special, and we are so glad you joined us. Don't forget to rate, subscribe, and leave a review. Just like food, delicious podcasts are better when you share them with others. Come back for seconds wherever podcasts are served, and we'll catch you in the next episode of the Food for Thoughtcast.
You can find us on Facebook and Instagram at The Food for Thoughtcast or at www.foodforthoughtcast.com, where you can link to all podcast players, or you can send us an email at foodforthoughtcmc@gmail.com.